breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting.
Good afternoon. Welcome to councillors and those visiting and those listening online. Welcome to you as well. Reminder for those here or close by that the mobiles, if you have them switched off, as it does interfere with our recording, and the meeting will be recorded. That's it. Please be seated. Thank you. I have one apology from Councillor Cox. We have declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? No. Confirmation of minutes. Somebody happy to move the minutes held on the 26th of August? Moved Councillor Dakin, second Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. No deputations, no petitions. We do have a community report from Ms Susanna Kosh from the Northern Regional Coordinator for Families Tasmania. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
We're very excited to have been invited along to speak to the council. So my name is Susanna and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Families Tasmania. My lovely boss Liz Crane couldn't be with us today, unfortunately. She had planned to come up. I'd like to pay our respects first to the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, and I acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of the land. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So I'm going to introduce you a little bit to our organisation, Families Tasmania. We've been supporting Tasmanian families since 1917 in some different guises. So some of you might know us as the Child Health Association Tasmania, or CHAT as we were formerly known. We decided to explore a new name for various reasons. Going back around about 50 or 60 years, we changed our name to the Child Health Association Tasmania from the Child Welfare Association to distance ourselves from other CWAs. And shortly thereafter, the wonderful Child Health and Parenting Service became the Child Health and Parenting Service, or CHAPS. So there began the confusion between CHAT and CHAPS. So that was one of the biggest motivators for us to finally change our name. We did a long stakeholder audit and community consultation to come up with our lovely new name of Families Tasmania, which we think just covers everything just nicely. We wanted a name that was inclusive and would reflect the notions of family, wellbeing, wellness, parents and support. As the regional coordinator, most sessions that I would begin, I would start with a little spiel explaining that I wasn't a child health nurse. So I don't have to do that anymore. So that's really cool. Very glad with that. Okay. So, but we still acknowledge our roots, because some of you might know that what is now the Child Health and Parenting Service was actually started by the women of the original organisation, who got together to lobby the government to improve the outcomes for young children at the time, back in the 1917 time. The infant mortality rate was more than 1 in 10 kids not making their first birthday. So that's where our roots are, and we still continue to have a great relationship with the Child Health and Parenting Service. So we've been around for 104 years. So we've evolved with the times. We really have moved with the times. As many of you would know, if you've been parents or currently are parenting, with the child health nurse system that we have, in past decades, every little township had its own child health nurse, and our role at the time was largely volunteering and fundraising to support those child health nurses. So we would do things like, pay the power bills and buy all the equipment for the nurses. As time passed and the government took over more and more responsibility for the Child Health and Parenting Service, we've had to change as well. So while we do still maintain some wonderful volunteers in our organisation, most markedly in our region here in the north with the lovely women who run the Westbury Play Gym for little people on a Thursday, we have shifted our focus now more to supporting families generally with information, advocacy and general support with parenting. We do have a wonderful history book, by the way, if anyone's interested. I'd be happy to drop some copies here to council. So what do we do now? Well, we have a number of programs that we run. Most notably is our wonderful Family Food Patch program, which some of you again might have heard of. That's led by our team, Family Food Patch manager, Emma Rowell. And that is, it's a really hard program to nutshell, but it's a peer education program at its essence around family food and activity, and under the funding model that gets run twice a year to around about, usually between about 8 and 12 participants who do a 6-week, 1-day-a-week program with Emma. And then we have lots of other fabulous resources that have been developed by the Family Food Patch team, which I use in my daily work with the Families Tasmania. Part of that we have the Well-Fed Tasmania food truck, which is also a mobile community kitchen, and that's in partnership with the Tasmanian School Canteen Association. Being a very small but powerful organisation, we often partner and collaborate, and we rely on other community organisations to support us, and then we in turn support them. We develop and host lots of different community events. Fairly recently we had our new brand launch up here in Launceston. It's in Albies Hall, so I'm not sure if anyone managed to pop in there or know anyone with little people in their world who did come and have a look. We have lots of other little events at the moment, tending to be a little bit more in the southern, because I'm just little old me who's not in Hobart, so I do get spread a wee bit thin at times, so I'd love some more sport for council. My focus personally is the parenting information. I've just come this morning from Lilydale delivering a 123 Magic program. So we offer a range of evidence-based parenting programs. My colleague Lisa, who has the role in the South, and myself have trained in a number of evidence-based programs, which means they attract the Communities for Children funding, which is pretty awesome. So we have 123 Magic, we have Bringing Up Great Kids, and we do Parent Child Mother Goose, which is just beautiful. With the advent of lockdown, we switched really successfully into the online environment, and we've continued that on to keep that as part of our suite of offerings. It works really well for lots of families to be able to access our services online. So I might run the 123 Magic program as an evening course, and then Lisa does a beautiful job doing some Parent Child Mother Goose rhyme and story time online as well. I mentioned earlier the Westbury Play Gym. That is the last remaining community volunteer group that we have in Families Tasmania. So it's been a long journey of change. At the moment, I don't have a walking group in our area with lots of fits and starts. COVID really made it difficult to resume that, but we have got family walking groups that still happen in the south. What I would encourage any of you to do, if you're interested in services for families, is have a look at our beautiful new website. We're very proud of it, which is just familiestasmania.org.au. And there you can see a whole comprehensive list of the types of services that we can offer. So our mission is to empower Tasmanian families to build their health and wellbeing through advocacy, education, community connections and support programs. So our site, again, it's designed as a hub, so there's lots of different streams of information. We are constantly developing new content to put up there as well. So we've got a few little snippets and tidbits there that some families with young children might find useful. Speaking of families with young children, our traditional focus has been in that early childhood space, but with our revision of our strategic plan, we are looking at expanding a lot of our services into at least those primary school years, which has always been a way that the Family Food Patch part of our organisation has operated. So, for example, a lot of the families I was working with this morning had kids in the school where I was delivering, although some of them still did have gorgeous little people that we had in care as well. So we're really, really grateful that you invited us along, and thank you very much to Deputy Mayor, who has been long an advocate of our organisation, and it was great to have the opportunity to talk, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna. Okay. Appreciate that update and wish you well in the role that you've got, looking after families in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we now go to public question time. The public questions on notice is there with the answers for people. So public question without notice is now time for public question without notice. A reminder, it is a question time, and also that if you should state your name and address, especially for those that are listening online, they can know who's speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Bullock of Ravenswood. I'd just come along to thank the council for finally and accepting the no right turn into and out of the esplanade. And now that it's been passed to remain in place, there's a follow-on. Is there thought to fixing any follow-on problems that has arisen of that decision, due to all the vehicles that used to go over the bridge and turn right now all go along the esplanade and turn left at Tamer Street. There is a right-hand turn at Tamer Street, which one vehicle every blue moon, laughing, actually uses it, and it'd be an easy fix by removing the right-hand turn to allow the traffic to continue through to the Kmart and Ravenswood. I've been stuck there with 5 turns of the traffic light trying to get through, because the traffic that wants to go to Invermay has to wait till after the pedestrians cross and no traffic can move. So a simple fix for that one, if you would
We're
actually
well aware of
look
that, and I have spoken to our person quite a few weeks ago, and I'm waiting for action on that myself, so hopefully it'll happen very, very soon, because I believe it's an easy fix to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also there is a matter that I seen a nice glossy that the Launceston City Council put out about future road usage in the Launceston area. Very nice. It was a waste of time, bit of rubbish, due to there was no mention of motorcycles in that actual looking forward, and there's at least 10,000 registered motorbikes in and around Launceston. So that actually needs to be looked at quite seriously.
Take that as a...
The council done a good job of upgrading Invermay Road with the islands along there, but there is one that sticks out that is an absolute pain, causes traffic build-up and is not needed, and that's the island outside of the Retreat Hotel, where there's people turning into the bottle shop there. What happens is, of an afternoon, the traffic stop at the traffic lights to go up to Mowbray. There's 2 lanes. The traffic blocks it up. There's no way that a car can get through into the right-hand lane to continue up the hill, or in the right-hand lane to turn right into Mackenzie Street. That island needs to be moved or removed.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take that on notice. And thank you very much. Appreciate those
very
questions.
much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello again. Okay, I had a question I'll notice in today's agenda, which includes what I consider convoluted statements, and I asked for some clarification. It's well worth a read if you haven't already. I note at the end of it, there's a statement that says the tribunal's finding was that with some additional mitigation measures agreed to by the expert witnesses for both parties to the appeal and included as conditions to the permit, P1 is met. So this is continuing from where I left off last time with the RAMPAT document. So today's question 1, to date basic studies are not available to accurately assess the impact the facility on Churchill Park Drive will have on nearby sensitive uses. The inclusion of the 100-metre buffer is an example. Constant reverse beeping and heavy industrial noise are also inevitable. My first question is one where the answer should be known. In light of the expert witnesses' belief that the 100-metre buffer can be ignored, what decibel readings would the facility in Churchill Park Drive generate during glass smashing activities, and how far would this noise impact the nearby surrounds? If you cannot immediately provide documentation to this effect, then P1 is not met.
Thank you. CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So that information was included in the development application that was submitted by the proponent. So it included acoustic reports by an appropriately qualified professional, and so that was then considered by the tribunal, who determined that the performance criteria was the acceptable solution wasn't met, and they needed to comply on the selection criteria, which they did. Sorry, hang on. The acceptable solution wasn't met, so they needed to comply with the performance criteria. So it's in the application.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay. All right, at a recent community meeting, a resident who lives near the rear of the site stated that at one's own residence, you would expect to have some time without noise. She is losing sleep and very concerned about her family's future, as are many people in that area. It appears acceptable to sidestep laws to begin work at 4 a.m, ignore a stated requirement in the RAMPAT document, regard the 100-metre buffer, and generally remove all amenity toward the residents of the nearby suburb. What action will council take if there are more than 2 valid complaints a year against the site operation, as required by RAMPAT?
We would take the appropriate action.
Which is?
Well, obviously talk to it when it's in operation. We'd have to go and talk to them and speak, and then it could be closed down if it was obviously didn't meet the conditions.
I'm trying to prevent wasting money and things into the future here. All right, the JJ Richards facility in Mackenzie Street is an existing plant in a more suitable area. It's away from residences, and the impact of its glass smashing can only be heard in the western end of Heritage Forest. It appears to be an act of irresponsibility to replicate an existing facility which is fully operational and suitably located. And yes, I do understand the commercial implications of Veolia and JJ Richards. Was the existence of the JJ Richards plant considered during the tender process? And if so, why did council see fit to give the tender to Veolia, who have to duplicate a facility which already exists? It just does not appear logical to me.
CEO?
So other than we obviously can't go into the specific details. There were multiple proponents that were lodged submissions as part of the tender process. So obviously it went through its assessment and was determined that Veolia was the preferred provider with the proposal that they'd put forward, and obviously that was recommended to council and subsequently endorsed. So the existence or otherwise of the JJ Richards current site really was a matter that needed to be determined through that process. So and they weren't successful, obviously, in the tender process.
Seems terribly wasteful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Jane White and I live in Invermay. When I last addressed this council on the question of damage to property, you told me that it would be a civil matter. In other words, the onus is on the owner of the property. My question, why would council force residents who have damage done to their homes by the constant vibrations of the new heavy traffic to undertake civil action?
CEO, do you wish to answer that?
Well, it's not the council's choice. The council's obviously determined the application pursuant to its obligations under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, and that was subsequently appealed to the Resource Management Planning Appeals Tribunal, which issued a permit. So
could you speak a bit slower, please?
It's a lawful activity in terms of the use of the road and the development of the Veolia plant on that site. Again, the law, the system of law in Tasmania requires that if there's damage that people allege or can be proven is caused by the use of a road, by a private use of a road, then it really is a civil matter for that to be resolved. It's not a council matter. And again, without going into the specific details, which we can out of a council meeting, certainly we can provide you with further information and detail about that. That's certainly my current understanding about how those matters are dealt with.
Question 2. Here's a scenario that I'd like you all to envisage. I get woken up every day at 4 a.m. My well-tended garden can't be enjoyed anymore by me, my family, or my friends due to incessant intrusive noise coming from the Veolia site, And for the record, this noise is one of glass smashing, trucks reversing, and general loud noises associated with a heavy industrial business. I end up inside for most of the time. The quality of my life and many other residents in the area diminishes as we spend more time inside. Constant noise is a very debilitating factor. My question: once a complaint has been lodged with council, what procedures are undertaken to address the complaint? What mitigation will take place? And in what space of time?
Well, space of time, can you answer that, CEO? We have answered part of that question already.
The council obviously receives complaints on various nature and various, be it noise, be it odour, for different activities. We investigate them all. So obviously it's hard to be able to definitively say without understanding the particulars of the nature that we're investigating, but what I can say is the council, in receiving a complaint, would investigate through our environmental health officers or through our regulations officers, depending upon the nature of the complaint. And it really is dependent upon what we find in respect of what those potential actions might be. It may well be that the complaint isn't valid and that the council would just, and obviously the matter would end there. If it is valid, there's a multitude of different ways that we can seek to remedy that, and really it depends upon the situation at hand.
Thank you. Question 3. Evidence of sound infrastructure planning was evident in the aftermath during recent floods in Europe. One reason given for this was because recycling facilities are required to be situated on high ground so they can remain operational when such events occur. The demand for cleaning up was immediately operational. In the event of a flood, the facility at Churchill Park Drive would be underwater, including the trucks. Insurance companies refused to underwrite facilities on floodplains. My question: why does the council support this operation of a known floodplain when it is internationally recognised that sites such as this need to be located in areas which allow for emergency operation and also ignoring local professional advice?
Well, council didn't support it and we actually voted against it, and you should be aware of that. And REMPAT decided that, and that is out of our hands. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Any further questions?
Mr Mayor, Robin Smith on behalf of Coffee Republic, a business in the Brisbane Street Mall. I've got a question about the Christmas tree this year. The council will be installing the Christmas tree as it has previously, although there'll be no Christmas tree lighting up celebration as there wasn't last year. I've asked a couple of years, and each year I resolved to come back and ask again about the height of the fence or some modification that would stop people getting in, because I think last year there were 60 to 80 incursions where people quite easily climb the fence, and invariably when they're in the enclosure under the tree they seem to pull the lights or the decorations out. And I think by the 25th of December more than half of the decorations and lights have been damaged or turned off. If council consider the fence modification and possibly guard patrols.
Yeah, we'll take that on notice, because I can't answer that, because we obviously work together with City Prom on the tree as well.
Thank you. Second question, the proposal to move the bus stops from St John Street to Deshano Way, the car park, care park, my car park, purchase car park, call it what you will. Would council reconsider that proposal and look again at putting those bus stops from St John Street on the streets, possibly around the Civic Square area, please?
I think that, you want to answer that?
Other than to say, obviously, and it's in the public domain in terms of the study, the extensive study that the council did to investigate all multitude of the potential spaces to house the bus interchange or the bus stops throughout the CBD, and certainly that location in Civic Square wasn't identified as a preferred site. Indeed, it wasn't even in the top 3. So the answer to that one would be no. We wouldn't reconsider that to consider that site.
Thank you. Then, in response to that, would council then consider other on-street locations within the city as opposed to that particular Deshana Wayside?
Look, we've gone through the study, looked at all options, and this has been the best site that's come up in all the study that we've been doing over many, many years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you. So now, where are we up to? Announcements back up again. Yeah, just a few that I would like to mention. One is obviously it was great to attend the City Park Radio AGM, and though they have a smaller number of members than we have as a City of Launceston, because we get about 3 people to our AGMs, they get some 40 to 50 people. I didn't count them, but there's at least 40 people, if not more, that were at their AGM. So, and it's good. It was good to go and hear the work they do in our community, but impressed with the number of members that turn up at AGMs as well. Also, I'd like to mention that it was fantastic to be involved in to welcome delegates to the Artlands Conference, which was here. And not only those here, but they were all around the country in different locations as well, in hubs, I think they called them, or different locations, because obviously people couldn't travel. So it was great to have them here, and it was a great conference, I hear, from people that did go there. And also that to be at Junction for the official opening, and a great time, 4 days. That's 3 days of pretty good weather. One wasn't as good for them, but it was a great time. A lot of people really enjoyed it. There was a lot of great local entertainment. And I must say the Welcome to Country there on the Wednesday night was absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best that I've seen, and they did an incredible job. So for those that didn't see it, if you can see some footage of it somewhere, it is really worth seeing and fantastically done. Credit to them, and congratulations to Junction on all they did over the period for the work. And I know a lot of people that went did enjoy it. And I think that is, the other one is, yeah, on the Sunday the 5th, along with, I think, Councillor Walker I saw there and Councillor Harris, to go to the Supporting Afghan rally. And I did speak with the president there, Youssef, and ask him what more that we can do, and he's actually talking with his group to see if there's anything else that we can do to support that group as well. So we should hear more of that. I have offered a reception of some sort if they'd like that, or anything else that they consider that we can then obviously take back and consider as well. So just so you're aware of that. Thank you. Councillor reports. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. Just following on from yourself, I also would like to recognise the work of the Junction Arts Festival Committee and staff with regard to the 10th anniversary of the event. I'm sure a number of councillors over the course of the festival were able to involve themselves in events, either as performers, such as Councillor Stosenchek did, or attendees at the numerous events that celebrated local. I think the wonderful thing that we've seen in the last 2 years is Junction's ability to be able to pivot, to still showcase everything that's special that Junction exemplifies, but how they've been able to use all local performers and able to attract all basically all Tasmanian audiences for the last 2 years, and still have sell-out events, which I think is testament to the way that they have grown that event. Mr Mayor, would like to also recognise the work of outgoing executive and artistic directors Frith Loon and Greg Clark, who have each brought something very special to that organisation through their respective roles. Frith, in her administration of the event, has simply done an incredible job to be able to grow the sponsorship, to grow the community support, but also grow, I think, the community ownership of the event. And matched with Greg Clark's artistic flair and ability to really work with local organisations and individuals, I think it's been a great success. And so we wish Liz Frankham and the committee and the incoming manager, Paul, all the very best for what is to come. But 10 years of events and 11 years of the festival, and you referenced the Artlands. We remember, of course, that the first Junction came about as a result of us winning that Regional Arts Conference 11 years ago, and how wonderful it was. Admittedly, many of the participants were still interstate, but how wonderful it was to be able to celebrate this year with Artlands. The final thing I wanted to reference, Mr Mayor, was the outstanding work of City Prom, who have and continue to work so hard for the betterment of our CBD. Often they reach a variety of different dead-end streets and some roadblocks, but it doesn't deter them. They keep going because they're passionate about making a difference, as we all are, to the vitality of the CBD. And wanted to particularly reference their outstanding grassroots branding campaign, Love Lonnie. I'm sure all of us have seen the way that this campaign has penetrated the market. It's a small grassroots campaign that has lots of ownership, lots of buy-in from all different partners in the community, and we continue to wish them well as they roll that campaign out. It's got great cut through and is a really successful evidence-based example of how you can work with partners to create a brand that sticks and works.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And just while on the CBD, I think probably the note that was in the paper the other day, which I think you referenced, was the increase in the number of shops that are now full in the CBD, which was interesting based on a conversation I had with a constituent a couple of weeks ago for an hour or so, telling me how bad the CBD was. So I think it's fantastic that the CBD is actually showing some increase in the number of shops that are showing signs of great life in the city. So I think that a number of the initiatives that we as a council are putting on, what City Prom are doing, and others are starting to engage the city. And for those that went to the conversations that we had down at the tram sheds a couple of weeks ago, watching how Melbourne evolved and now putting our footprint across what we're doing, there's lots of similarities in the methodology that we're going about revitalising our city, and it's great to see the evidence in the number of shopkeepers that are now opening the doors again, which is fantastic. I just wanted to highlight again, a junction was fantastic, so I won't say any more than other than it was a great event, enjoyed by from the youngest to the very oldest, I think, throughout the process. I know my grandchildren had a wonderful time at Tony's Imaginary Circus on the Sunday. But I just wanted to just note that during the week, a small event happened out at the airport where we welcomed Adelaide to Launceston for the first time in 20 years, direct flights, which are now coming 3 days a week. And I don't know whether anybody heard, and thank you, Mayor, for coming out and attending that. It was just a fantastic event for the airport, and fantastic for the employees of the airport who were all present watching the festivities as it went on, when we saw a full plane of people coming in from Adelaide, and we sent a full plane back the other day. And I don't know whether anybody's caught up with the press today, but today Virgin have actually announced direct Perth, Launceston as well, coming in 3 days a week. So fantastic things out there in a time where aviation is very challenging. We have great staff out at the airport who are working really hard to try and improve the outcomes where we can actually get direct routes in from places where COVID isn't causing us some issues. And I think for some time to come, we're going to find point-to-point travel is something that's really important. So therefore, Launceston continuing to go out there and look for its opportunities to get direct flights in, because also Brisbane's now daily. We're now actually getting opportunities to actually tap into markets which traditionally would have had to bounce in through Sydney or Melbourne to get to us. So I think whilst it's small, I think places that are in the hospitality business and so forth like that will actually really benefit from these initiatives that have been taken on by the airport and the investment that's going into doing that. And I'm really thrilled to say, Virgin and Qantas are both putting their hands up to try and actually improve the lots for our city and for others around the country. So hard times, but actually in the longer term, we actually may really benefit from what's going on at the moment.
Thank you. Any other councillor reports? Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And at the risk of repeating what you had said in regards to the Afghan rally that was held last weekend, I certainly did attend, and I appreciate how Launceston community have got around and come along and supported our Hazara community, who are, of course, Afghanis, but also quite often Hazara refugees in their own country in Afghanistan. But it's very heartening to see Jeff McKinnon, who helped organise it. He is definitely, worthy of thanks for what he does for their community. And I certainly would urge and encourage, Mayor, as you say, you're in conversation with the Hazara community, and I'd urge and encourage you to find any practical means of support that we can lend the Hazara community at this time. Of course, it would be traumatic when the country where your friends and family still reside is going through such a difficult transition, and I'm sure there are ways that the council can find to offer practical solutions and practical assistance in that time. We know that the Hazara community are welcomed and embraced by this community, but anything more that we can do, I would urgently encourage the council to embrace.
Thank you. Any other councillor reports? Councillor Priest.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that last week I attended the reception to mark the centenary of the Royal Society of Tasmania, and I really appreciated the opportunity to attend that function. Being a councillor has given me that opportunity, and I've enjoyed learning what their roles are and who their members are. I'd also like to recognise the event I also attended for overdose awareness on Tuesday, I think that was. I spent some time folding cranes, and it was a great opportunity to practice mindfulness and see the value that people have enjoyed while finding mindfulness in that task. I took some cranes home that I folded. They got better as I went. And also, I would like to say that I too enjoyed Junction, and it was the first time that I attended. I took my husband with me, and I hear so many of councillors went, but wearing masks, I didn't recognise anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Harris?
Yeah, I wasn't going to, but yes, it was difficult to recognise someone else with a full mask on, and particularly Wednesday night when you were meant to wear ski gear as well. It was rather difficult. So Junction was great. I participated in the Tweed ride on the Sunday. That's my 6th Tweed ride. I think that's every one of them. It's been great fun, and I do encourage others out there to think about having a bit of fun out on the bike and dressing up in tweed. I also attended the Royal Society meeting, and I didn't know what it was about, so I really enjoyed understanding that. But also attended the seniors' celebration morning tea yesterday, where they had the St John Street City Heart Part 2 given to them, and Jaime did a wonderful job of explaining it, and at the end of it he then got grilled by those who attended, and he finished off by saying it was the most difficult question and answer session he'd had in regard to it. So that was a great morning tea, great part of it, and great to see that our senior citizens take such an interest in the development of our city. But as I said, everything else I think has been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor reports? No? Questions by councillors? Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Only found out the other day York Park, the UTAS Stadium, is 100 years old. Just wondering if we can have some celebration coming up for it to milestone for a beautiful arena. I remember going to footy seeing Scottsdale, Lockford City South, East Launceston and Launceston play in the 60s, and it was great to see it. And some of the players, Danny Hall, Bob Withers, Jim Leach, Badger Luttrell, Kenny Saltmars, Kevin McLean, Peter Daniels, Brian Lowe, Charlie Thompson, Graham Wilkinson, Jeff Long, Brian Lowe, Barry Lawrence, Neil Maynard and Michael Roach. So it's got some history and I think we should recognise it.
Thank you. We'll take that on notice.
Thank you.
You did forget to mention the premierships that North Launceston wins there, but that's all right. Any other questions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I note the questions that Lon Morell asked on notice in the agenda this week, just in regards to the footbridge that UTAS has constructed across the North Esk River, adjacent to their development, and the answers that are provided there. What is the process for council now accepting ownership of that footbridge, and how will that occur?
CEO.
I did provide a detailed briefing in the council bulletin last week. Essentially there, as we normally do when we take over infrastructure, there's a defects liability period, and we work through any defects and how we manage them, which might be the developer, on this case, UTAS, fixing them in the short term, or it could be holding financial security longer term to make sure that it does get fixed, or if it fails, then we've got security to resolve the issues.
I suppose more to the point then, to be more precise, will councillors get to vote on accepting ownership of the footbridge?
That's normally done by officers. So council has made a decision to take on the footbridge as an asset. The details of how that happens has been developed by the officers, which is normal in transfer of assets from developers.
Thank you.
And so what would the timescale be for that process, and when would we expect to take ownership of the bridge?
As described in the bulletin, that's expected to occur this week, today or tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Walker.
Further questions? Not on the footbridge. Thank you. It's just a question that goes to the council's use of synthetic grass in various areas around Launceston, especially roundabouts and road verges such as the centre strip in Vermey Road. Does the council have an official policy on the use of synthetic grass for this type of street furniture, for want of a better word?
Director. GM, sorry. Oh,
no, it doesn't. And if you've got concerns, happy to discuss what they are.
Well, certainly won't be discussing them here, but I suppose just as a follow-up question, it seems to be, and it's something that's been brought to my attention, something that it's been a more recent development in Launceston, but is the council aware that in other parts of the country these are being removed and are being seen as sort of not the best practice solution in terms of permeability of surfaces and the health of the ground?
It's not our preferred option either. It's generally used where there's an issue in it's usually conversion of roundabouts where there's been vegetation growing in the middle, and there's difficulty maintaining it. Then we'll convert it where it's a sort of a local residential to synthetic turf, because maintaining a roundabout means that it has to be closed, it has to be done of a Monday evening, so the significant cost implications of, I guess it's significant cost drivers on why we do that, but it's not a preferred method. It's to minimise maintenance costs.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Committee reports. Heritage Advisory Committee, moved Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Walker. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
Just briefly, and just to highlight in conversations that I was trying to remember earlier in my reports, and just noting that there was a pretty good conversation by Rob Adams from Melbourne City Council, which is on our City of Launceston YouTube channel. If anybody wants to flip in there and listen to it, it's quite a good listen, I think, and it really highlights, I think, the direction that we're taking as a city as well, and how well in step with a lot of that stuff we are.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'd just would like to point out, as is in the agenda, that in conversations that was held on the 12th of August, and the tram sheds is available on the YouTube, the City of Launceston YouTube channel for those who are interested. It certainly was a really good attendance there. It to me highlights, I suppose, the amount of thought, especially academic thought, that goes into what makes a good city, what is not always apparent, what is going on behind the process that allows for cities to become enlivened, whether it's by, through population, through people living in a city, and traffic management and so forth. And of course, there's always a disparity, I suppose, between that academic approach and the practicality of what developers wish to do in a city. And we're living in a time now where the cost of money is low, developers are looking for opportunities, and Launceston is being pushed and pointed towards developments which may be good or maybe not good for the community, but it is a time where we need to really be aware that Launceston will be going through a transition, and that we must steer that transition for the benefit of our livability, which we love to talk about here, and also to preserve our heritage, which we also love to talk about as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 13.2, Tender Review Committee. Councillor Mackenzie moved. Councillor Dakin seconded. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak?
The information's there.
Councillor Dakin, any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 14.1 is the council workshops. Move Councillor Harris, second Councillor Walker. If you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris.
Just briefly, and I'll tie two things together here. One of the items on the council workshop was the Palawakani language, and we spent a good hour and a half on that, and it was very interesting to hear how they are remaking the language. When I went to the Afghanistan rally, they spoke in Afghan for part of the rally, and to listen to a native speaker of another language and then to have to try to convert that back into my language of English to then write down a word, it would just be incredibly difficult to be able to do that. And it just goes to show the amount of difficulty that we have in actually trying to accurately recreate a language that hasn't been spoken for 150 years. It was just something that was very profound to me on the Sunday, to listen to the Afghan language and some just echo around the civic square made me think that that's a great international thing for our city, that we can do that, but then to actually try to understand that back to what would have happened, 200 years ago. It was quite an interesting contrast for me. Other than that, it's just some of the other things that we do in our council workshops. For those of you who can read the agenda, perhaps those who second it might want to speak some more on that, but that was it.
Thank you. Councillor Walker? No? No?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do wish to speak to it. As mentioned by Councillor Harris, it was I'm not sure of the language that was spoken at the Afghan rally, but I echo your sentiments exactly. To hear that echoing around Civic Square was a beautiful moment in that particular gathering. Yes, I did want to thank Annie Reynolds and Daisy Allen, who came in and educated the councillors on the development and the continued use of Palawakani in Tasmania. Such a long-term project going on for decades, incredible amount of work, an incredible amount of research and dedication. And as I'm sure everyone knows, that a language is such a central part to anyone's culture. It's such an important glue that holds a community together. And the Tasmanian Aboriginal community are to be commended for the dedication and the work that they do in that area. It's not something that they always share widely, because their priority is for their own community to develop and restore their culture. So to have that honour of getting a little insight, I think was a great thing for councillors, and it goes towards the council developing an action partnership with our Aboriginal community. And of course, to do that requires understanding and communication between different cultures, essentially. And that is something that, as we develop as a community and develop that respect and understanding, will bear fruit. It'll bear amazing opportunities for growth and for learning for especially Launceston community, who haven't always had that opportunity with our Aboriginal community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Harris wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's all councillors. That is carried. Thank you. 19.1, delegation from council. Move Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded Councillor Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mackenzie, wish to speak?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to thank the officers for bringing this back. I think this is in response to a question that I put a few months ago, and I think the speed in which you've done it's actually good, because you put good diligence into the process. Some might read this as a money grab by council. In my view, it's far from that. It's actually just ensuring that the ratepayers...
You're on the wrong item.
Oh, which one am I on?
You're 19.2.
My apologies, I've jumped ahead of myself.
So you want to move that still?
I'm still happy to move that, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I just think that it's just a... sorry, my apologies. I was getting excited. I just think it's a sensible process that we go through. I know councillors around the table sometimes query about how much delegation authority we give to the CEO, but in this case we're talking about roads which are effectively being maintained by the council already, and it just makes sense for the delegation to be given to the CEO or somebody who sees appropriate in order to make those roads become part of our property for us to continue to maintain anyway.
Question from Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I appreciate if the CEO or an appropriate officer could explain to me what the main differences would be in delegating this. Would it be that this would take an inordinate amount of time for councillors to deal with themselves, or is it merely procedural and something that councillors wouldn't normally deal with anyway?
Yeah, exactly the latter, but anyway.
Thanks for the question. It really is just a procedural matter to bring the land under the ownership of council. We have really almost all of the rights over the land. The remaining interest is really a technicality. It makes total sense to come to us. We could bring them back to you if you wanted, but it's really an operational issue. We can sort it out at an officer level. There's no rights being infringed or anything like that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor wish to speak to it? Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do have concerns about delegating. I know that, of course, that, the arguments that this is just a practical matter, that, of course, there's nothing to see here, there's nothing to worry about. But, of course, what we know with the law is that quite often when things are changed, there are unintended consequences. Now, I'm not to know what they may be. I'm not to, you're not to know until sometimes after the fact. In retrospect, you would look back and see that, oh, in doing so, we've actually had an unintended consequence. Now, I'm not even saying in this case that is the case either. And I appreciate that there's been a good explanation that's provided in today's agenda for anyone who wishes to read it. And in this case, it is quite straightforward. But my concern remains that councillors are elected to do a job. That's what we're here for. And that job is not to to delegate that to other people. You're here to represent the people of Launceston, and I would encourage councillors, to query further that process by which more and more tasks that have been part of council duty are being delegated as merely operational matters.
Thank you. Any other people wish to speak? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
Not unsurprisingly, I don't agree with Councillor Walker. We employ competent people to sit in the roles of CEO and other management positions within the council. If we were to have every nook and cranny come back to this council table, we'll be here on a daily basis dealing with the minutiae of council. I think this process is simply a matter of trying to ensure that we're dealing with the things which are more at the strategic level for council rather than in the weeds and dealing with the things that are day to day. Yes, there'll be mistakes made potentially from time to time. I accept that that's the case, but we employ people to do those sorts of things. There's no given right that we actually know any more about this, and we probably don't know any more about these things than the actual officers who are involved dealing with these things on a day-to-day basis. So I'm quite comfortable noting that every time we do give a delegation, it comes to council to say this is the nature of the delegation, and we just have to weigh on balance as to whether it's appropriate for us to do that. I think in this case there's no doubt that it is.
Thank you. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against, that's 1 against, the rest are 4. The motion is carried. 19.2, the disposal. Councillor Mackenzie. Is there a seconder? Councillor Soward. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak again?
I got quite excited about it. I've already spoken on it, but we'll start again. Yeah, look, I think this is a very good work done by our council officers to bring this back. as I said at the beginning of the previous matter, that, some might see this as a money grab for council. The truth of the matter is that people who come to us and ask for easements and other matters to be dealt with in their favour bring a load of work to our council chamber. And usually the reason they bring it to us is for a benefit that they may get from doing it by taking out something that shouldn't be there, or they don't want to be there, to enable them to go further with some of the things they wish to do on the properties that are there. I know from the examples that we've already had over this current calendar year that's time consuming for our officers to go and research a number of things, and usually often going back to significant years early and trying to research how things and why things happened. To come back with a report to us for us to determine whether we will transfer an entitlement across to somebody else. I think that the fees are there actually saving the ratepayers of Launceston some money on the basis that we are mitigating some of the costs that we incur to the benefit of individuals. So I think it's a very appropriate thing that we do. And I do note that within there's also the ability for us to where appropriate, to make recommendation to council from time to time to remit part or all of the fees. So therefore, if there's a genuine reason why we shouldn't charge that fee, we have that ability to do so. So I think it's really well balanced in the way that it's been presented back to council. So I commend the motion to everyone.
Thank you. Question from the Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, and certainly agree with all of those things that were just said, is the complex request fee enough?
Good question.
Yeah, I believe it's a reasonable estimate of the costs we would incur for a large complex matter. We could review that if we're receiving inquiries of a complex nature on a regular basis. But at this stage, it's enough.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor. Very happy to second it and thoroughly endorse the remarks from Councillor Mackenzie in the previous item and in this one as well. It's just, I guess, all I wanted to add to it. It says in a couple of places, I guess, some really pertinent points on page 31. It lists, and I won't go through them all, Mr Mayor, but it lists the work that is entailed in doing this sort of thing. It actually spells it out very clearly in the 3rd paragraph and the 4th paragraph. So, very significant work. And it also, and I think Councillor Mackenzie summed it up really well when he talked about the fact that, it is for the benefit of the person undertaking the application. So it says, in view of the above, the information I've just touched on, a fee relating to the disposal is reasonable and in the public interest. And I think it's fair and just, and thank our officers for the very prompt attention to it and getting it back to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, further to the points made by Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Soward, that of course, when a property is encumbered, it sometimes can be purchased at a discount. It's certainly the nature, of the property market. So you are certainly getting a material gain, a financial gain, by removing those encumbrances. It's not always possible to do so, but where it is, there's certainly a benefit to the landowner, and certainly, there is a labour-intensive side to dealing with the intricacies of these things, property searches, title searches and so forth, and surveying and conveyancing and the like. So it does make eminent sense. It's certainly not something where the council's seeking to make a profit, but simply to recover the cost of doing that business. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Mackenzie wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.3, Leeds Tasmanian Family Historical Society. Moved Deputy Mayor. Seconded Councillor Dawkins. Wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Just briefly, I thank the officers for the report, which sets out the history of the organisation and the way that they have been model tenants, and also provided some upgrades to the facility, also noting the number of members, which is quite significant, and the origins of the organisation and their first meeting in Kings Meadows. I think the $1 per annum for the next 2 years is appropriate. I think, again, this represents the significant number of ways that this council supports community and diversity of community. obviously appreciating that it's a hard job to be able to, if you like, audit or summarise all the things that we do in this space and community. My suggestion is today that we just start and that this one becomes the first item on a list that represents community and the way that the organisation supports community. So perhaps one, if not all, the General Managers will take that on board and we can begin the list of keeping a really comprehensive list of the way that we support community and put that on our website and celebrate and share it, because it's extensive, it's diverse, and I think the way that we support community should be celebrated more.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Mackenzie.
I'm just querying, Mayor, the 2 years, and there may be a logical thing. I notice the potential refurbishment of the Albert Hall is in the commentary, but it's saying there'll be minimal disruption to the Tasmanian History Society through that. And given that our normal thing has a mayor lease not exceeding 5 years without advertising, is the reason why we wouldn't be doing 5? Is it?
I am told, yes, it is in relation to the Albert Hall renovations, and that 2 years at this time would be reasonable, given that the city park stables wouldn't be affected in the near future. But yeah, just to see how 2 years would go for them. And normally, of course, as you said, we would offer 5 years. But yeah, just see how the renovations go at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins. Any other councillor wish to speak? Deputy Mayor, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. 20.1, moved Deputy, seconded Councillor Soward, to the key to the city, recognition, of Ariane Titmus. Deputy, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, because there has been significant media and announcements with regard to this, I think what's really appropriate here is the matter was considered at closed council last fortnight, the details of which and the reasoning for which are clearly communicated in the report. And just from a good governance perspective, it's noted here today. I'd like to thank the CEO and officers for the way that they interrogated the notice of motion that was unanimously supported not so long ago, and the way that suggestions were brought back to that meeting 2 weeks ago. Importantly, that council presents the key to the city, the date of which has been determined as Friday the 17th of September, to Ariane Titmus. I think that's going to be a really exciting day here in Civic Square, Mayor, where in the presence of young people, of other swimmers, of family and friends, and just members of our Northern Tasmanian Launceston community, the opportunity to celebrate a young person's achievements, to encourage others in our community to continue in their chosen pursuits. It'll be inspirational and a great day for our city as we recognise the first female and the youngest recipient of the keys to the city. Also noting that the 50-metre competition pool at the Launceston Aquatic Centre will be named in honour of Ariane Titmus, and that will happen through a process that will come back to council. Obviously, things such as that will take some time to nut down and bed down, and that will come back for future consideration. And indeed, I think excitedly, the opportunity for a scholarship to be named in her honour to recognise someone who perhaps can be inspired by her pursuits at the Launceston Aquatic Centre, the details of which also will come back to a future council meeting before a process of having people in our community apply for that is unveiled. So just generally, I think it's a really good way of bringing this matter to conclusion after it went through the process of being considered 2 weeks ago, and we look forward, Mayor, to the conferring of the key to the city next Friday.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor. Just echo everything the Deputy said, but I'm going to be very brief on this. I know you don't like things repeated, Mr Mayor. I know you're a very good chairperson as far as that goes. 3 words I would sum it up for, if you look at that report on page 39, the word past being the traditional key to the city presentation, present being the significant naming of the pool as it's spelled out there, and future, a scholarship designed for a person of the future. And I just think that's just a wonderful balance, past, present and future, and a great acknowledgement of a wonderful achievement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor, and certainly well summed up by our Deputy Mayor. And yes, I was one that when we went to closed council to discuss this, was probably one to more on the side of caution and think that, well, perhaps one honour is enough in this situation, but certainly in our excitement and exuberance surrounding the Olympics, and in particular a local woman achieving so much on the world stage, it's understandable that there were many suggestions as to how that could be acknowledged and that honour could be bestowed. As it turns out, I'm in full agreement now with what has been offered, and hopefully is being accepted by Ariane Titmuss. Of course, it's a big achievement what she has done, and it's a big weight on her shoulders, and it is more of a weight on her shoulders what we are bestowing upon her, because this is a young woman who has become a world beater, and that is such an inspirational role model for other young women of our town. So of course we should acknowledge that. We haven't given the key to the city to a young person, let alone a young woman, before. So again, it's a huge role model. It's a huge responsibility that Ariane has on her shoulders to be that role model for young women in our town. And I think that in that sense, this is entirely appropriate that we further encourage that endeavour. And as mentioned by Councillor Soward, the scholarship being a practical way in which that honour can be bestowed upon another as they come through. And in that way, I think that it's entirely appropriate, the honours that we are about to present. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, my fellow councillors, for their words. It's always difficult to find something new to say about such an award. However, I do have a good angle for you. So when Ariane won her 2 gold medals, she didn't just defeat the field, she defeated the greatest, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Katie Ledecky. And that is a feat that really should be celebrated long and hard. So much so that the media, particularly in Queensland, soon claimed her as a Queenslander because she'd spent the past 6 months there, past 6 years, I should say, training there since she was left Tasmania as a 14-year-old. So I sent her father a quick text saying, Steve, there's a bit of a question about whether Arnie is really a Tasmanian and whether in fact you've, take the girl out of Tasmania, but can you take the Tasmania out of the girl? And I thought, how can I determine that? So I asked her 3 questions on one subject. Do you know what savoury toast is? Have you ever eaten it? And does she know the recipe for it? Because when my daughter went to Melbourne, no one over there knew what savoury toast was, and in fact it is perhaps quite a Tasmanian delicacy. Very quickly, the phone rang back with a text, and it says, hi, Ariane here. The answer is yes, yes and yes. So you're very pleased to know that despite the fact she's been in Queensland for the past 6 years, she is in fact a true Tasmanian, and she, I'm sure, looks forward to her time coming down here next week, where she will obviously have some Australian swimming details to do on Tuesday up at the pool, I think, before we bestow the key to the city on her on Friday, and then she will soon be resuming her normal training schedule for next year's World Championships and Commonwealth Games. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'm not going to repeat anything other than say well done from all the comments that were made. I actually wanted just to highlight the process. And I think that set out in the notice of meeting is actually why we have closed councils. And I think we received a letter this week from somebody who actually suggested that closed council isn't appropriate to have. But I think this is a very good example of why closed council was good. We could talk about the issue without potentially embarrassing or inflaming anything with anybody else, and then bring it back in this manner. So I just really wanted to highlight why closed council is a useful process.
Yep, thank you. And it's because obviously her trip wasn't known at that time as well. Any other councillors? Deputy Mayor, wish to close?
Just briefly, as the sports media turn their attention to Launceston next Friday, we'll elevate the city and hopefully talk about more than savoury toast. But I am excited at the opportunity that we, as has been referenced around the table, have that opportunity to really recognise a young person who has chosen to follow their dream, has been supported by their family, has had opportunity to continue to develop their skills, has gone on and achieved at the highest height. And I think for all of those young people that will come, I know there are students coming from Sacred Heart Primary School and St Patrick's and other schools to be present, and no doubt other swimmers as well. There is the opportunity for them to be inspired to continue with their chosen passion and hopefully follow in the footsteps of a great.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We then move on to 20.2, appointment of Acting Chief Executive Officer. And it's moved by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie? No. Councillor Harris? Any councillor wish to speak to it? No. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. And close the meeting. Thank you. Thanks for your attendance.